A lot of names have been thrown out there for the Cleveland Browns head coaching job. Some of these are up and comers. Some of these are in-house hires. Some of these are retreads. What I want to do over the next 3 days, hopefully this is how this gets uploaded, but over the next 3 days, I want to review the Browns options as we know them now. Now, I'm recording this video Monday night. If something drops Tuesday morning, it's not in this video. My apologies, but I'm just working with the information that I have. And in the future, I'll try to be able to invent a time machine to get on top of all of that. But in all seriousness, what I want to do is just look at what people have been talking about, what options are available, and just give my thoughts on some of these options. Now, before we even get into it, I just want to be 100% clear here. I am not gonna take my thoughts about these coaches that deeply. I will be willing to be proven wrong about every opinion I have about a coach, except for like maybe Cliff Kingsbury, because like I'm pretty sure about my opinion on Cliff Kingsbury. But for a lot of these guys, especially the up and comers, I'm going to be open to being wrong on those guys or right on those guys or maybe underrating or underestimate because I don't know much about them and there's not much to know about them. With retreads, it's a little different, but I just want to put that one out there just so people don't lose their mind or just to remind people that you really shouldn't be losing your mind about this portion of the Browns head coaching search because it's just really highly hypothetical at this point. But let's look at the names that are retreads that are available to be head coaches. That's the names we're going to focus on. And before I do that, got to thank my sponsor, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code Worst Take. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. So let's start with the names that are less hypothetical. These are names that the Browns have been linked to either because they've requested an interview, they've interviewed, or they're highly rumored to be interested. Todd Monken. He's not technically a retread. I think his only coaching job as a head coach was at a college? It was like at a college in 2012. Let me double check this, right? The old memory isn't as good as it used to be. I'm not that old, but just gotta fill some time here while I search. All right, Southern Miss. He was the head coach at Southern Miss. He won Coach of the Year in 2015. Left in 2016 to take the offensive coordinator job at Tampa Bay. So he's been a head coach before. I'm not putting him in retread because he coached at that job. I'm putting him in retread because Todd Monken feels like a retread. Like he does not feel like you're hiring a up and coming guy. Todd Monken feels like, let's just give somebody a job, right? That being said, does Todd Monken make some sense? I think he makes some sense to the Cleveland Browns. Todd Monken was able to demonstrate that he could develop a really nice run game. He certainly upgraded the passing game in Baltimore. Look at what Lamar's passing numbers were under Greg Roman. Look at how they looked under Todd Monken. I think there's a significant difference there. Todd Monken, a pretty good offensive coordinator. Here's the thing about Todd Monken. I can surmise from the outside looking in, or at least I think is true from the outside looking in. Again, I might be wrong on this. Todd Monken seems to be a bit of a mercenary when it comes to his mindset of coaching, right? He has the one quote from last year out where he's talking about the Browns job. And he's like, a lot of these jobs tell you it's a family that they care, but they'll fire you if you don't. He seems to just look at every job as just that, a job. And for some people, that's refreshing and that could work really well. For other people, they could see it as a lack of buy-in, right? That's kind of how Todd gets down. I think that's what ruffled feathers in Baltimore, right? Baltimore's trying to tell him it's a family and you need to buy into the Ravens way. And Todd Monken's old enough, been fired enough to see through that bullshit. And he didn't buy into it, right? And if you're relying on Todd to buy into something like that, you're probably going to be very frustrated with Todd. I would also say that there's enough out there to suggest maybe Todd can be a little difficult to work with at times, because this isn't the first time we've heard these things about Todd, right? When he was in Cleveland with Freddie Kitchens, albeit it's understandable, it's Freddie Kitchens. There was friction there, certainly, and Baker Mayfield got the worst of it. And what he did in Cleveland didn't really leave a great taste in your mouth. I would say this: Todd Monken is the best hire you can make if you don't get John Harbaugh and you're left to like your 10th or 12th option, right? Like if Todd Monken's your 10th or 12th option, okay, I'm not excited, but I'm fine with it. That's what I would feel about it. I like him more as an offensive coordinator, but I think he needs to be the offensive coordinator in very specific situations. I think you need to have a very specific plan for what you're going to do at quarterback to bring in Todd. Don't know if Todd really makes sense for the Cleveland Browns job, but he does make sense somewhere. John Harbaugh, did a whole video on John. I'm going to be very brief here. My big concern with John is what the Browns need right now. The Browns are pretty much a fresh rebuild on offense. They're an up-and-coming team. He would have to develop them as he goes. He's never really done that in his 18 years in Baltimore. He's always had a finished product, a team that's had multiple Hall of Famers on it. And maybe you can argue that this job would be similar to when he took the job in Baltimore, because Baltimore at that point had a Hall of Fame defense, but the offense was, lacking. So maybe you can say that this is the same exact thing. And maybe that's what John Harbaugh is thinking. And maybe that's why John wants to take the job. He sees this as the same thing that he's took in Baltimore. I think that could be possible. But if you're the Browns, you really got to find out how serious he is about wanting the Cleveland job and how much time and opportunity cost you're willing to put in to go after John Harbaugh, knowing that you can miss out and end up, throwing a bone at Todd Monken, which nobody would be excited about. That's the thing with John. If you want to know more about how I feel about the John Harbaugh hire, did a video. It's a pretty good video. Make sure you check it out. All right. Mike McDaniel, who they interviewed on Monday, he makes sense on paper. In practice is where I have the concern with Mike McDaniel. But on paper, Mike McDaniel makes a lot of sense. Like, look at the job that he did when he took over in Miami with Tua, got Tua to being a passing leader in the NFL. Really, what people think went wrong with Tua isn't Mike McDaniel's offense, but Tua's hip and brain injuries, the amount of concussions he suffered, that really is what slowed Tua down and kind of made it so that he's not the same guy anymore. Mike McDaniel can put together a run game like nobody's business. Mike McDaniel, I think, is still a talented pass game conductor. I think the issue is he's kind of been tied down with a Tua that they should have never really paid down there in Miami. And like, if you're talking about the technical aspects of the job, especially if we're talking about hiring a head coach, offensive coordinator might be a different deal. But if we're talking about hiring Mike McDaniel to be the head coach, all the technical stuff I can get behind with Mike McDaniel. That's not the problem with Mike. The problem with Mike is the people stuff. Don't know how good he is at that, right? Feels like Miami led the league in players-only meetings while he was there, even when they were good, even in seasons where they were good. Like, they were really relying on Calais Campbell a couple of years ago to solve a lot of internal issues for them when it came to locker room management. You would have to sell me on a pretty good plan to supplement Mike McDaniel's inability to manage locker rooms, because he just doesn't seem like he's good at it. Seems like he's a really good technician, a really good offensive coordinator, a really good mind, but not necessarily a great manager. Like, if you could morph him and Kevin Stefanski into one super coach, you have your coach hire right there. But you can't. So that's kind of where you end up in a funky place with Mike McDaniel. makes a lot of sense as an offensive coordinator. If we're talking about offensive coordinator hires, he's probably at the top of the list. I think Mike McDaniel would be, I think he would make a lot of sense, especially if you're planning on like trading up for Dante Moore or going after Dante Moore. I think him with Dylan Gabriel as a backup can really work in a Mike McDaniel offense. There's some upside to it, no doubt. You just got to ask yourself, like, hey, man, is the people stuff better? Because he was bad at the people stuff. And you got to have a way around the people stuff with them because the people stuff was bad. And you actually just got to manage the situation with Deshaun Watson and Shedeur Sanders. I don't know about that one, dog. I don't know. Like, Myles Garrett might bully him. Like, I just get the feeling that Myles Garrett might bully him, and I don't want that feeling. I don't want to feel like my head coach can be bullied. And Mike McDaniels feels like he could be bullied. Maybe that's just perception because he's not a very big guy and he's kind of nerdy. But again, go look at what happened in Miami. It didn't feel like he was really in charge there in Miami. It felt like guys did whatever the fuck they wanted to. And that's what concerns me. Like that's just a bad combination here in Cleveland. All right, let's go to guys that the Browns aren't really connected with, but their names are out there in the head coaching search. Robert Saleh, former coach of the New York Jets, current defensive coordinator of the 49ers. I don't know about this one. I think a lot of people like the ideal of Robert. I do remember hearing negative things about Robert in New York. There have been other reports of Robert having some pretty concerning tendencies in his last go around at head coaching hires. And I do think there's a reason why there's not that much noise around his name right now to be a head coach. I don't think he got fired in New York for absolutely no reason. I think that Aaron Rodgers took the brunt of the blame there, but you don't hear a lot of people in that who are around that situation talk about it as if Robert Saleh was like a victim there, right? Like they feel like he was thoroughly a part of whatever happened there. So you got to sort that out. He is a defensive mind, right? So he'll be coming in to run the defense. I think he'll be fine, right? The big concern with Robert is that he runs the same defense as Joe Woods. I do think he's a little different because he doesn't have the emphasis on the corners as much as Joe Woods did. But there's still that concern. You're going back to a 4-2-5. The Browns' defensive personnel was not great in a 4-2-5. I just don't know if Robert is who you need to go after this cycle. I think you're trying to solve problems at head coach that Robert doesn't really indicate he's in the position to solve. Brian Flores, he's another one that a lot of people like because of his demeanor and his appearance, right? He's the anti-Mike McDaniel. Like, you feel like Mike McDaniel could get bullied, but like you could see if you close your eyes, and I'm not trying to be like fucked up here, but if you close your eyes, you could see Myles Garrett and Jerry Jeudy playing keep away from Mike McDaniel, right? Like, you could envision that. You cannot envision such a thing happening to a dude like Brian Flores, right? He does not give off those kind of vibes. Very serious guy, very football coach guy. The defense he brings in doesn't really fit the Browns personnel, which is my main concern with Brian Flores, right? He is a 3-4 kind of downhill blitz guy. And not to say that the Browns personnel can't adjust to that. It's just you invested a lot at 3-tech over the last couple of years. Switching to a 3-4 where 3-tech's going to be asked to do a lot of different things. It's kind of a risk that I don't feel like is necessary to take right now. I wouldn't be a big fan of B-Flow here. I don't think he makes a ton of sense here in Cleveland. I think he's an aesthetic hire because people want different aesthetics from Kevin Stefanski. I don't imagine that that's going to really address the root of the issues that you fired Kevin for. So I wouldn't be huge on Brian Flores. Mike McCarthy, I could see it working, right? He's an offensive guy. He has a good track record offensively. I do think it is curious that he left Dallas and Dallas's offense got better this year. Something to think about. he's kind of like the new Herm Edwards, where he just gets brought up as a head coaching hire every offseason because he's had some success. I don't know. I think if you hired Mike McCarthy, I wouldn't be like, this is a disaster, right? I just wouldn't be that excited about it, if I'm being honest. Cliff Kingsbury, I'm not a big fan of Cliff. I know a lot of people like Cliff. I know a lot of people bought into the hype with Cliff. I just am not a fan of Cliff Kingsbury. I think that he has a long track record of quarterbacks leaving his offenses and getting better. I think it's going to happen with Jaden Daniels, by the way. I think he kind of gets credit for a lot of things he didn't really have a ton of credit for, right? Like he got his first promotion from Texas A&M to Texas Tech because of the success of Johnny Manziel. Now, I don't know how many of you guys watch Johnny Manziel, but Johnny Manziel's relationship to the offensive coordinator throughout his football career has always been irrelevant. But that's how he got his first promotion. And then he got fired from Texas Tech, who, by the way, has reached more success last year than they had while Cliff Kingsbury was the coach. He gets fired from Texas Tech, and he gets promoted to the Arizona Cardinals job because he kind of knew Sean McVay, because he was a part of Patrick Mahomes' story, even though Patrick Mahomes was significantly better as a pro than he was in college. Baker Mayfield was better at Oklahoma than he was at Texas Tech. But he got the promotion because he had those connections. They wanted a McVay guy. They went after Cliff Kingsbury. Then they fired Cliff Kingsbury. And then he got the job at Washington. They take Jaden Daniels. He has success with Jaden Daniels. But then this year, not as much success. He quits the job to try to look for a head coaching job. I think Cliff Kingsbury is not what people think he is as an offensive mind. I think he is people have an idea of Cliff Kingsbury, but the reality of Cliff Kingsbury is, a slightly above average offensive mind who can be figured out pretty easily because he relies a ton on short game, quick game, and using wide receivers as running backs, basically, right? Like that's kind of the MO with Cliff Kingsbury. He's not a disaster of a coach, but I just don't think he's a good coaching hire. Do I think, like, if I were to hire an offensive mind for the Browns, I'd take Mike McDaniel and all his bullshit over like Cliff Kingsbury because I think Mike McDaniel is actually a good offensive mind. Cliff gives you the aesthetics of somebody who could be a great offensive mind. He doesn't give you the actual great offensive mind, though, right? Like, he went to help with USC and Caleb Williams last year, and that was like his worst year of college. Like, I don't think he's good at his job, but I get why people get excited because he seems to have good PR out there. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of Cliff Kingsbury. If the Browns hired Cliff, I would try my best to not be an asshole about it. I would definitely not, call it doom on day one, but I'd be a healthy skeptic of the whole Cliff Kingsbury hire. Vance Joseph, I'm not a big fan of Vance Joseph as a head coach. I just think he's one of those guys who needs to just be a DC because that's where his career is, Let's go to guys who might be fired soon but aren't technically available. Nick Sirianni, I don't really have interest in Nick Sirianni. Don't really think he makes sense for the Browns, right? His big issue in Philadelphia is he sucks at coordinator hires and he hasn't been able to figure out that offense. The Browns fired Kevin Stefanski because he sucks at coordinator hires and he hasn't figured out the offense. All Nick Sirianni brings to the table is a worse temperament than Kevin. And honestly, I think Kevin would be interested for that Philadelphia job, just because I think he would just kind of let the management hire his coordinators at this point because he has to admit that it's failure there. But yeah, Nick Sirianni, if he becomes available, not really that interested. Sean McDermott, if he becomes available, he is interesting because the Browns had a lot of interest in him back in 2017. That was also like almost 10 years ago, so I don't know how much interest is still there. I'll say this. Wouldn't hate bringing in Sean McDermott. I don't think he's a terrible coach, Would it be a perfect fit for what I think the Browns need to do? No. but I think it can work, right? Let's go to the last category I have here. Coaches that you would trade for. Only Matt LaFleur's in this category. I don't know about trading a first round pick for a coach, even though, look, I'll admit the history behind it seems to be pretty good. The Bucks traded like 2 firsts and 2 seconds for John Gruden. That worked out. They won the Super Bowl. The Denver Broncos traded like a first round pick for Sean Payton. That worked out. So, like, look, it's not like the history of coach trades is terrible. It's actually pretty good. I do question whether the Browns are a head coach away. It feels like we're a lot further away than that. But if there is a coach I'd be willing to trade for, it would be Matt LaFleur, because I think he's really good at developing quarterbacks, and that's a skill set that the Browns need. I think he's really good at offense. Like, if I can think of a dream candidate for the Browns, it would be Matt LaFleur. Would I be willing to trade a first-round pick? Probably not. Probably not, right? Like, I'd rather just take my chances than give up a first-round pick for Matt LaFleur. If the Browns had a quarterback on the roster, maybe. If Malik Willis was 23 instead of 28, maybe. But, yeah, just trading for Matt LaFleur, giving up a first-round pick, I mean, like, that means you're not going to even be able to entertain a trade up for a quarterback. Getting Matt LaFleur, I would want a quarterback there. Now, if Matt LaFleur ends up getting fired, I would 100% want to be in the Matt LaFleur sweepstakes. And if he chooses you, you'd be super thrilled about that, and you bring in a bunch of old Packers and you'd be happy. But, yeah, I don't think it's realistic. And if we're talking about trading for Matt LaFleur, again, the data on it's good. The data on trading for coaches is surprisingly good. Go look it up. It's not really a lot of bad coaching trades out there. It would probably mean a first or second round pick, and I don't know, man. It's like multiple for some of these coaches, man. I don't know about that, But that's where the Browns are as far as the retreads that are available. Let me know what you think of the market. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.